stack them up there. Well, it's 5:32. I'd wait a few more minutes, or I can get started if you guys would like, or no? Okay. Okay. You signal the booth that I'm going to get started. They told me to give them a thumbs up. Okay, good evening and welcome everybody. Thank you for coming here tonight and giving us a bit of your time, and thank you for your interest. This is a Citizens Academy, just called Budget 101, just some basic information about the budget. We do have a commissioner here with us, but tonight is not a decision-making night. No decisions will be made. This is not an official commissioner meeting or workshop. It's just an informational session to tell you a little bit about our budget process and give you plenty of time to ask questions if you have any. I do have some prepared presentation, and then we have a microphone out here because this is being recorded for broadcast on Deltona TV and our website, so that if you do have a question, I can bring you the microphone, or you can come up to the mic, and that way it'll be recorded along with the answers. So the budget process starts really in April most years, and the final budget doesn't get adopted until September, so that's almost 6 months of the year spent of planning and doing calculations and having meetings and discussions. And the end result is a book that looks like this, about 328 pages of numbers and funds and facts and figures about Deltona. So why do we go through all of this? Why do all of this work to produce the budget? So do we do it to plan for the expenditure of limited resources? B, to make sure that expenditures don't exceed available funds? To make sure expenditures support the city's strategic plan, or because it's required by state law? If you guys have a handout, I'm sure you've looked ahead to the answer, and you know that that's a trick question because it is all of the above. Law, state law, and what's called truth and millage, or TRIM, which is part of state law, requires that we have a budget, as does the city charter. We're required to do that by September 30th of each year. The budget also helps us to plan the use of city resources because we always have more needs than money. It carries out priorities. It puts dollars to the commission's priorities that they set as part of our strategic plan. And once the fiscal year is gotten underway, it controls expenditures to make sure that we don't spend more money than we take in. One thing that makes government different from corporations and business is the use of funds. Our accounting rules require that we use funds to segregate different types of revenues and their expenditures. The general fund is the main fund that governs all of the day-to-day operations except for the water, wastewater treatment facilities. So it's fire department, law enforcement, general government, parks and recreation, public works, everything except Deltona Water is accounted for in the general fund. We have special revenues that are used for certain types of revenues that are generated for very specific reasons, and those would be things like solid waste, street lighting, those are called non-ad valorem assessments, and I'll get into that in a minute. Any kind of grants that we get that are for specific purposes, those are all accounted for in special revenue funds. We have one enterprise fund that is used for standalone business type operations, and it includes capital equipment and infrastructure for those operations. In Deltona, we have only one enterprise fund, and that's used for Deltona Water, our water, wastewater utility. Other cities use enterprise funds if they have golf courses or airports or other kinds of operations that they operate as standalone businesses. And finally, we have capital projects funds that are used for major facilities construction or purchases. And in Deltona, we have a park projects fund that we use to build any new parks or make improvements to existing parks. And we have the municipal complex funds for our buildings. We also have a replacement equipment fund for major capital purchases each year. Since most of the budget probably surrounds the general fund, that's all the day-to-day operations, this pie chart illustrates our revenue sources for the general fund. So where does the money come from that runs the city from day to day? By far, the largest source of revenue is property taxes there on the right-hand side at 38% roughly. Then we have public service taxes that are levied on electricity, telecommunications, and so forth. We have revenue sharing and intergovernmental revenues that are some sales tax revenues, some fuel tax revenues. We have franchise fees, and then we have other. This chart is based on an average of the last 4 years. And of course, in the last 4 years, we've had a couple of hurricanes, so that makes that other piece of the pie a little bit larger than it would be if we hadn't had those 2 hurricanes. But that's roughly how our revenue picture looks. Then once we get all that money, we spend it. Where does it go? Well, by far, our largest expenditure is public safety, about 55%, and that's police and fire. Then we have general government, which is all the city management, administrative operations, finance. We have parks and recreation at about 7%, roads and streets, public works at about 5%, other, and that includes, again, hurricanes at 9.9%. Without the hurricanes, it would be about 6%. And then a very small part is the 2016 bond issue that was used to fund transportation in the center. I put these 2 charts together on this slide just to show that we take in about 38% in property taxes, but we spend about 55% on public safety. So everything that is paid in property taxes, what we spend on police and fire is more than that, and that's been the case for every year for as far as back as I've looked. So here's another question, quiz time, about how many people live in Deltona. 68,900, 77,500, 90,700, or 113,300? That's correct, it is C, 90,700, or about 90,746 by the most recent estimates. We are by far the most populous city in Volusia County. The next most populous is Daytona Beach with about 68,000, followed by Port Orange at 61,000. Because property taxes are the largest single revenue source that the city takes in, I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how property taxes are generated. A lot of the meetings that the commission has are about setting the millage rate. A mill, or the millage rate, is the amount of taxes levied for every $1,000 of taxable value in your property. Now, taxable value is not the same as market value, it's less than that. It's the assessed value less any exemptions that you have, and that's your taxable value. The excerpt on this slide is from a real tax bill. I don't know who this is. It's just one that I selected off the property appraiser's website. But it shows our millage at 7.85 mils, and that's been our millage for the last 2 years. The assessed value on this particular residence was $105,782. Then they have an exemption of $50,000, which is probably their homestead exemption. And that brings them to a taxable value of $55,782. You take that millage rate times the taxable value divided by 1,000, and you get the city taxes of $437. That's Deltona's taxes. However, in this slide, you can see that this is the full excerpt from that same property tax bill, and you can see that Deltona is one of several entities that's represented on a resident's tax bill. So when you look at your taxes, and you might say, well, this person might look at their bill and say, well, my taxes are $1,450. Well, only 437 of that is Deltona city taxes at about 30% of the bill. And you see the counties on there, as is the school board, some of our special districts. So there are many taxing authorities that they all have meetings, they all set their own millage, and they all levy taxes on property. If there were no exemptions on this property, they'd be assessed on $105,000, and the taxes would be more than that. So that's why it's important to get any exemptions that you're entitled to. Millage does not equal property taxes. Millage is just one part of that property tax equation. So like I said back here, you take the millage rate times the taxable value divided by 1,000, and that's your taxes. So any part of that equation that changes is going to change the amount of taxes that you pay to the city. So the millage rate affects it, but also your taxable value, and certainly those exemptions play a role in how much taxes you pay. Millage does not equal property taxes. I got a call from someone just a few months ago when they were looking at properties to purchase in Deltona, and they called me and they said, why is Deltona's property taxes so much higher than everybody else's? And I said, well, are you looking at the millage rate? And he was. So he was comparing our millage rate to that from other taxing authorities. And our millage rate there is the highest one on that bill, but that doesn't mean that we have the highest taxes, because our assessed values tend to be lower. So going into that, what is the average Deltona tax per residential parcel, or per residence? And if you've looked ahead, you probably know that the answer is A, $441, or about $440.89 to be exact. That's a mathematical average. And so the reason for that is millage doesn't equal property taxes. That's how we compare to other cities in Volusia County. DeBerry's average city taxes per residential parcel are a bit lower than ours, but most of the others are higher. And if you consider that New Smyrna Beach, Ormond Beach, they're out there oceanside, those properties, if you went to purchase them, they would probably cost more than the same size parcel in Deltona. So their taxable value, market value, all those values are higher, and that's why their taxes tend to be higher, even though their millage rate might be lower. Millage does not equal property taxes. I have a couple other charts about taxable value in Deltona. This is per capita taxable value per residence. So if you took all the residential taxable value in Deltona and you divided it by the number of residents, you'd be about $59,000 per resident. And you can see that it's higher in some of our other cities in Volusia County, including Ormond Beach, New Smyrna Beach. And that's because, again, those properties are out oceanside, and they tend to be have a little higher market value and higher taxable value than properties of the same size in Deltona. This is total real property taxable value from 2007 to 2019. And we probably all remember what happened in about 2008. We had the Great Recession. So you see that summit there and that very steep fall between 2007 to 2012. That peak there in 2007 was about $3.77 billion total real property taxable value, $3.77 billion. And in 4 years' time, it fell to $1.3 billion. So in 4 years, the city lost more than half of its total real property taxable value. And just to give you another quiz time, there's not a slide on this, but homesteaded properties are limited to 3% per year taxable value growth. So if every property in Deltona were limited to 3% taxable value growth per year, does anybody know how long it would take to get back to that $3.77 billion that we had in 2007? Any idea how many years it might take? Never? A little bit sooner than never. It actually works out to 36 years at 3% per year. And that's assuming there's no more recessions in 36 years, which I think is probably doubtful. So that's how bad and how fast it can get if there's a really bad downturn in the economy. Another quiz, property owners can take a discount of up to 4% for early payment of their property taxes. If everyone in Deltona took that full 4%, about how much would be the discount in total? $325,000, $560,000, $600,000, or $740,000? Well, if you've been looking ahead in your handout, you know that it is D, $740,000. If your tax bill is handled through your mortgage company, they're probably paying it at the first available moment and taking that full 4% discount. When we budget property taxes, we can't budget fewer than 95%, but we usually budget at 95% because a lot of people do take the full 4% discount, but some people don't pay at all. So we don't budget 100% of property taxes. We don't assume that we're going to get everything that comes in or that's levied.
So if your home is paid off, you're probably not getting the discount.
And the question was, if your home is paid out, you're probably not getting the discount. Yes, you could get the discount. It just means that you can. You just have to send your payment in November when the bills first come out, and a lot of folks do that. I don't have a statistic on how many do, but you certainly can get the full 4%.
I wouldn't think that it would be the majority. They just don't think about that. Some of them are. I'd be surprised if it was the majority.
Yeah, and that's a good question, how many people who pay their own actually get that discount, and I don't have a stat on that. But yes, anyone who can get that 4%, and that 4% is not only on your property taxes, but also on your non-ad valorem assessments, which is what this slide is about. On your tax bill, you might see some additional special assessments or non-ad valorem assessments, and those are things that are assessed for special services such as solid waste trash collection, street lighting, stormwater, and we also have lake cleanup for certain residents here in Deltona. Those rates are also set annually as part of the budget process, and there are public hearings for those, just as there are for the millage rate. They are accounted for in separate funds, so we have a separate fund for each one of those assessments that we collect, And the most common ones that you would see here in Deltona are for stormwater and garbage. Again, street lighting is another one that you might see, and lake cleanup. We have some of the other cities. There's another city in Volusia County that has a fire assessment fee. There are different types that they can assess, but we only have 4 types here in Deltona. This is what the tax bill looks like if there are non-ad valorem assessments on it. This comes below the part where the millage is. And on this particular tax bill, this resident has garbage and stormwater non-ad valorem assessments. Property taxes could be an entire workshop all on their own just to talk about, and there are other people who know far more about it than I do. But it's important to know about your property value, and your exemptions, anything that you might be eligible for. So if you have any questions about that, questions about your own piece of property, and exemptions that you might think you might be entitled to, you can go to this website. You can also call them. I have their number here as well. But you can call them and go over your tax bill with them. If you think that your taxable value is incorrect and you want it to be reevaluated, you can talk to them about that too. Their phone number, in case you want to call them and don't have web access, it's 386-736-5901. And I would encourage you, if you're just curious about the topic or you're curious about your own property, to check out their website or give them a call. Yes, and so question.
Just a statement on that. For veterans,
We're recording this, so we have a mic for questions, but that's fine. Go ahead.
okay. For our veterans, if they have a disability through the VA, they can take their paperwork down to the VA or to the tax agency down there, right next. It's on Enterprise, right next to where you get your tags for your vehicles, and whatever your disability is, whatever your percentage is, they will reduce your taxes by that percent. If you're 10% disabled, you get 10%. If you're 100% disabled, you don't pay those taxes. So if veterans don't know that, a lot of them don't know. A matter of fact, one of our elected officials from another city whose husband is 100% disabled from the Iraq War didn't know that. And so I know that, when they came back from our last training session, that she and her husband were going down to the tax office because a lot of people don't understand that if they're disabled, that they can get a discount for that too.
Is that on the entire tax bill?
On your, through the county, through the city. When you go down and show them what your disability is, whatever the VA has put you in for, that's what you get on your tax bill. It's reduced.
On every line item?
Yeah, so whatever the total is, it's 10%. Yeah. Or whatever the percentage is. So if you are 10% disabled, it's 10%. Yeah.
And that is an excellent point, because there are a lot of property tax exemptions that are available to people for various reasons, such as military service, disability, widows and widowers. Of course, homestead is the most common. We had a resident that came into City Hall, again, a few months ago with her tax bill and was asking about her mortgage payment because her tax bill was being paid through her mortgage. And looking at her tax bill, we noticed there were no exemptions on there. She hadn't called the property appraiser to tell them about homestead exemption. She didn't know what that was. She didn't know about it. She'd come here from Puerto Rico and had no idea. So hopefully she called them, because we talked to her about it and told her definitely give them a call. Make sure you get that taken off your bill for next year. So yes, there are a number of exemptions that are available to people for various reasons. And if you think you might be eligible for something, definitely give the property appraiser a call.
The disability is $5,000.
Okay, and disability is $5,000? Okay. So there's an exemption for $5,000 for disability. Thank you. Okay, so going away from property taxes, but to talk about the rest of the budget, here's another quiz time. How many employees work for City of Deltona? Is it 217, 333, 561, or 794? Well, if you have your handouts, you probably know the answer is B, 333. That's about 4 employees per 1,000 residents. That's how we stack up compared to some of our other neighbors here in Volusia County. And again, that's city employees per 1,000 residents. Now, this does include law enforcement personnel. Here in Deltona, we don't have our own police department. We contract with the Volusia County Sheriff's Office, whereas other than DeBerry, all of the rest of the cities represented here have their own police department. So that makes their totals a bit higher. But if I were to add in our contracted deputies into our total, it only goes up to 4.82. So we're still pretty lean. Deltona is very leanly staffed. Yes, question?
That's something that I've noticed before, and my question is, what is the explanation for why Deltona is able to operate in such a lean manner, and are we still delivering the same quality of services to our residents as other cities?
Well, I guess my answer on that is that we just adjust to it as far as how we're able to get things done, that we get what we get done. I'm told, I've been with the city about 2 years, I'm told at one time that we had more employees or more budgeted positions than that. Of course, the recession, we had to do a lot of cuts, and that cut a lot of positions at that time. I guess the answer is we've just had to adjust to that with current workload, and folks just have to do what they can do. I've been in government for most of my career, and I've never worked anywhere where we had more people than work. We always had more work than people, way more work than people. Most governments that I've seen are very leanly staffed. Okay, so one of the big things about doing the budget, of course, is the technical part where we're trying to figure out how much money is going to come in, and that pretty much falls on finance to do that. We try to take our best estimate of what we're going to get, and there are a few sources that we look at to try to get those numbers. One of them is from the property appraiser. We get information from them starting in June 1st, and July 1st is when we start getting really firm numbers where we can really start firming up that millage estimate. But we also have a consultant who looks at property appraiser data throughout the year and tells us what the property values are doing in the county or in Deltona. The state also has revenue estimating conferences, and we use that information to help us estimate what we're going to get from some of the other state revenue sources. We have consultants that look at things such as the water rates for the water department when we're setting that budget. We look at historical actuals, we look at what the past has done and what the trends are to try and get our best handle on what sort of revenues we're going to get, because we have to know what we're going to bring in before we can figure out how we're going to spend it. So that brings us to expenditure estimates. What happens in April is the departments begin putting together their budget requests that they submit to the city manager. And in June is when the city manager will meet with the department heads to talk about that. But those department requests are a big part of putting together what the expenditures are going to be. So we look at the positions that are already budgeted. We look for any requests that they have for additional staff based on the level of service they want to provide or any additional services that they're planning to do. Again, we look at historical actuals. We look at how expenditures have trended in the past. We looked at any contracts we have, such as we have a union contract with our firefighters. The sheriff's office has a contract with their officers. And if there are contracted increases, we have to build those into our budget. We look at trends. We look at what's happening around Deltona. So if I drive down the street, I might see that there's a lot of houses under construction, so it's probably a fair guess that our building department's probably going to be a little bit busier in the coming year. And then, of course, we also have to take into account our strategic plan and the commission's goals and directives. As we have budget meetings, the commission talks about things that they want to see. We get input from the public, and they take that into consideration. And we also use our strategic plan to guide what things we're going to be doing in the future and try to fit that in to what we can do to fund it. So all that together, this timeline starts in May, goes all the way through September. Right now we're in May. We just had our budget kickoff. We have the first round of workshops, and the departments are making their requests. We get into June. June 1st, the property appraiser releases what's called the pre-preliminary tax roll. So it's our first real numbers about what's happening with the property values. The commission begins to set the non-ad valorem rates, and the departments meet with the city manager in June. In July is when things really begin to heat up budget-wise and in the summertime. But July 1st is the preliminary tax roll, and those are the numbers from the property appraiser that really allow us to get a good handle on what the millage rate we would like to set for the coming year. We have additional workshops on the general fund and the capital projects funds. The commission sets a tentative millage rate. It's one of several public hearings that they have where the public is invited to come in and give input, and they talk about the possible millage rate for the coming year. And then they also have non-ad valorem rate resolutions. Again, it's the first of many public hearings where people get to come in and give their input about those non-ad valorem rates. August, we have additional workshops. Based on the tentative millage rate, the trim notices, truth in millage notices, are mailed out to property owners so they can look at what millage rate is being contemplated for the next year. And we finally complete the draft budget. We finally put it all together, and then in September is when the 2 public hearings happen where the millage is finally set, the budget is approved, and the final budget is adopted. The budget has to be adopted on or before September 30th, so there's no exceptions to that. They can't say, oh, well, not really sure what we want to do. Let's wait till October. You can't do that. You have to have a budget by September 30th. The fiscal year begins October 1st. And our next workshop this year for the 1920 fiscal year budget is May 13th, in case anyone wants to come back and give input on that. So that's it for the prepared slides, and I just want to open it up to anyone. If you have any questions, we have a microphone up here, or I can bring the mic to you, so that way any questions you have will get to the tape as well as any answers, because this is being taped for rebroadcast. And just like to see if anyone has any questions or any comments. Okay, seeing none, I'd like to thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. I definitely, once again, thank you for your interest. And I appreciate your time this evening. Thanks so much.
Workshops and items are going to be open